It's a distraction from the task of regenerating Stratford. And that's a quote, actually, and it's very interesting because it did seem like a wild goose chase to be going on.
There was one common piece of sort of, what's the best way of describing this? Perhaps glue might be the better way of describing it. And that, of course, was the prospect of an Olympic and Paralympic Games and what that could unlock. And that could unlock a lot of ambitions that were being held locally by the then councils.
One of the big lessons is that if you're going to do big things, you need a single purpose focused delivery organisation.
Hello, I'm Toby Fox from 1.5 million new homes, the local government challenge sponsored by Redloft and by Vistry. Now, across this series, we've been asking the question, what works, but also what has to change to get more homes built? In this series, Building the Olympic Park, we're asking a different question. How did one of the country's most ambitious examples get started and continue when so many other projects stall or fail? And we've been listening to the people who were there who made it happen. Neale Coleman, Michelle May, Eleanor Fawcett, Guy Nicholson, Paul Brickell, and the man who literally wrote the book, Dave Hill. In this episode, we're asking, why did the Olympic Park project succeed when so many other projects fail?
Newham because I was a councillor in Newham at the time too. The people, I was a new councillor, so wet behind the ears, and they said to me, stop going on about, this is in 98, 99, going on about London bidding for the 2012 Games in East London. It's a distraction from the task of regenerating Stratford. And that's a quote, actually, and it's very interesting because it did seem like a wild goose chase to be going on.
Yeah.
The person
and not for bad intentions, they just didn't feel that it was going to contribute.
It was going to contribute.
I mean, it's worth saying that if the Games hadn't been a success, nobody would have ever talked about the legacies.
If you were to go back in time and actually had the power to regenerate this part of the Lower Lee Valley, would you do it by means of attracting a major sporting event? No, you wouldn't. You would do it completely differently.
Remember at that time there were plans emerging for what was called Stratford City, for Stratford.
Yes, yeah.
There were ideas for the whole stretch of the Lower Lee Valley, which were sort of our unofficial community-based ideas, because no one else was interested really. It wasn't a London government. We were on the border of four local authorities, no coordination. So we had all these ideas, but no way of delivering them.
Yeah. Going back to when John Major was Prime Minister, you can find elegantly written plans and prospectuses about how it could be transformed into something truly wonderful. Nothing ever happened. So from the very beginning, you could argue with the premise, that you wouldn't start from there. You wouldn't say this piece of land could be magnificently transformed initially to host an enormous sporting event.
And my schooling of leading that and trying to get the four boroughs to talk to each other, which was no mean feat, was that was actually where we set the north-south 3-mile long park, from Hackney Marshes all the way down to the Thames. The town centres and the neighbourhoods that I was mentioning, the 6 town centres, 3 of which were new, and the approach to where the new housing would go and where the schools, and that they would be like the glue between the old and new communities. So I think that I think is quite interesting in terms of that was then what made it quite a no-brainer for what the Olympic masterplan should be, because it was fitting into that.
So we thought the Games would bring a lot of public money in short order. We thought that it would also put us on a kind of a global investors map and a global brands map for people who might want to come here. And then thirdly, and probably most important for us, it was an era, where if you talk to East Londoners as we were, about development, it was Canary Wharf.
Yeah.
And we weren't impressed at that point. I mean, Canary Wharf's very different now, but at that time, there was a couple of towers, lots of jobs, none of them had come locally. Development was a dirty word, regeneration was a dirty word. And so we thought, kind of, if we could capture the Olympic spirit, which was, hey, here's a big opportunity to do something for yourself and for your family and for your community, you know, do well at school, get a job, start a business, grow a business. It might be a way of getting our communities behind the idea of development in general, not just the Olympics. So that was sort of why we thought.
So there's something about the Olympic spirit, about everybody can have a go.
Yeah, you can have a go.
And there's a legacy as well that's important to the Olympic Games. Always.
The 4 boroughs didn't form the Development Corporation because they didn't have the authority, and don't indeed, even today, have the authority to do so. Only the Secretary of State had the authority then to do that. That, though, transitioned and evolved over time through to the Mayor of London having the power and the authority to, certainly within Greater London, to establish a development corporation without the authority of the Secretary of State, basically. There are 1 or 2 parliamentary instruments that still have to be gone through, but they're mainly to do with regulatory powers and to do with the transfer of planning powers back and forth, for example. So just for clarity.
Absolutely.
But at the time, 4 boroughs working together with 4 very different boroughs, yes, of the same political kind of composition. All 4 were Labour authorities. But what started to happen very quickly was that, there was a 5th borough and then a 6th borough. So what is now the Royal Borough of Greenwich, for example, and the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham also came into that partnership because the game's footprint kind of spread appropriately and rightly into those 2 respective authorities. So we had quite a big partnership and we established that partnership, and that was very important. And I think it took a lot of mature kind of local government leaders who acknowledged each other's strengths and weaknesses, their characters indeed, who had more patience than perhaps others did, and all of those sorts of things, everything that you would normally expect in any kind of relationship going forward. But there was one common piece of sort of, what's the best way of describing this? Perhaps glue might be the better way of describing it. And that, of course, was the prospect of an Olympic and Paralympic Games and what that could unlock. And that could unlock a lot of ambitions that were being held locally by the then councils about where the future of their particular boroughs, and certainly this part of East London, this part of the geography, where indeed it could go. Very different proposition perhaps for Greenwich and for Barking and Dagenham, but for this part, in other words, around the Olympic Park itself,
because Barking and Dagenham and Greenwich had part of the games, but weren't adjacent to the park itself.
That's right. And but a very important set of relationships because it actually gave a far greater kind of emphasis for the need for HM government to come in behind, and we brought forward this proposition, what we called convergence at the time. Which meant that, which was accepted by Number 10, and ministers immediately came in to support the boroughs to bring together kind of, should we call them government departments around social investment and change. So that was very much to do with reducing health inequalities, improving the quality of housing that was already here, and then off into the world of employment and skills and education. So across all of these very profound public services, and I must emphasize, it was because of the catalyst that was brought about.
there were too many moving parts for it to just somehow organically turn out right. And here I'm thinking not just about the Olympic Park itself, but, you know, all the surrounding neighbourhoods as well. And so I think really thinking about how to get the DNA right so that we were creating a place that worked for the games. So the logic of having obviously the park in the centre where all the spectators would be, you know, ringed with the venues and then with all the back of house, and this kind of masterstroke, that what that then meant was that after the Olympics, you had the park, you had the venues, and then all of your sites were where you could stitch in with the surrounding communities. And I think that was so brilliant, because what that meant was that once you cleared all the back of house stuff and temporary venues out of the way, you were then from day one facing outwards. Because I think that's one problem that you know, Olympic parks and other major developments have, is that sometimes they become quite introverted. And of course, when you're talking about a legacy for East London, right from the word go, you need to be connected with East London, right? And so I think that design move where we immediately created a place that was going to have tentacles, you know, it was going to be stitching into the surroundings, I think is a really good example of what I mean by a master plan that really sort of translated the ambition into bricks and mortar, you know, what you would actually build on the ground.
For a lot of local people, they probably would, you know, they might not have got tickets for staff. So, you know, there was a lot of trust you needed to build about this is really going to be for them. For me, I sort of think more about, you know, some of our buildings. So I led our work on delivering our schools. So we've got 3 schools on the park. The Mossbourne Primary was our first, up by Here East in the north of the park. And then the Bobby Moore Academy, which is a split site, a secondary school on Stadium Island. And then in Sweetwater, Tower Hamlets bit of the park, we've got the Bobby Moore Primary School. So we made a really conscious decision in the master planning of the scheme right in the early days of 2011 that those sorts of buildings would become really important places of exchange for us. So this was about where they were situated and when you delivered them. So the schools are on the edge of the park, and they were delivered early because we were quite relaxed about young kids from existing communities outside of the park joining those schools. Yeah. So there were a few conversations where developers would say, well, aren't they going to be full before all of our new residents come in? And we're like, but, you know, that's great. It's a place of exchange.
It occurred to us 2 things. First of all, that this was going to be a beautiful place, right, with the park and everything. What they were planning in Legacy was going to be beautiful, and we never thought of, you know, Stratford as being particularly beautiful. And secondly, that a lot of people would have their attention here, not just during the games, but forever. You know. Yeah. Obviously, you know, a football club puts you on a world stage. Even, bless us, it is West Ham, but you know, a football club puts you on a world stage. A lot of people will visit here. It will be a tour. So those things made us think, oh, hang on, this is going to be a very significant new part of London. Because the original plans for Stratford were for a business district, by which you meant shops and offices. Yep. And that's where it stopped, really. And obviously it was a much smaller area than this became. And we thought, no, this is going to be a part of London of the significance of a Bloomsbury. That was a big inspiration. Or a South Kensington or wherever. And that's why in about probably that's why probably in about 2008-9 we started thinking about universities originally coming here. And again, the we was the local authorities and local community organisations. Because the official plan by that stage was to have the beautiful park, but to build lots of flats, high-rise flats. Okay. If you remember, the original plan for the Legacy was you had to build lots of tall flats because we had to pay £1 billion back to the National Lottery. Right. And we were saying, no, actually, there's an opportunity to bring universities in here and cultural institutions. We spoke to a lot of universities. We got University College London interested. And indeed, they were going to build on Newham land outside the park originally before they decided to come here.
in retrospect, it seems so obvious. This is almost easy to forget. But one of the first decisions that we made was that we didn't want to create new town centres within the Olympic Park. We felt that it was really important that the new neighbourhoods kind of plugged into the existing town centres, because that was the way that the existing residents and the existing businesses would be, part of all of the regeneration benefits. So not only did we have, of course, Leighton, Stratford and Bromley by Bow, but we were also going to create 3 new town centres as well at Hackney Wick, which is obviously sort of taking shape now really, really successfully, down at West Ham, and which I think is just sort of coming on stream now, and then further down the valley in Poplar as well. And so the decision to have those town centres at the heart of the new developments meant that we weren't just creating a suburb. These were going to be real bits of London, with schools, with stations in the centre of them, with, everything civic and sort of community related, all carefully located right at the very edge of the Olympic Park, so that it wasn't a us and them type situation that would sort of develop there. And I think when you walk around it today, that blurring of the edges, hopefully is something that you kind of enjoyed experiencing when you were walking around it.
We had a lot of arguments with the Olympic Delivery Authority in the early days about what should and shouldn't happen here.
Because they're worried about a sporting event and making sure that's slick and efficient.
They were thinking about legacy. We were particularly thinking about legacy. It was difficult to get them to open the doors to local communities.
Yeah.
And they were very good at telling people what was going on, but that's not the same.
But we didn't see it as an endpoint. We just saw it as a moment of transition.
Yeah.
An important point and an important moment of transition, because the world was turning up and it had to work and so on and so forth, of course. But it suited, but bottom line was that you had a deadline.
Yeah.
And that is the strength of it. I come from the world of the theatre industry and the live performance industry. I grew up, certainly as a young adult, in a professional sense, in the world of deadlines. and so to me, it was quite familiar. Oh, yeah, we got a deadline. Yeah. We better work to it then.
There are going to be people in those seats watching.
Exactly.
We better have something to show
And it
them.
could be a bit embarrassing,
Yeah.
Sort of, but on a serious kind of sort of note, what that kind of brought about was a great deal of focus. But then there were those of us sitting there who recognised, but this is about 2025, not 2012. And where is that going to be? And that gives us the place, it gives us the community out there, it gives us the homes, it gives us the workplaces, the employment spaces, it gives us the cultural spaces, the social spaces, it gives us the environment.
I'm being critical, but I'm understanding. But they'll be on their way.
Yes.
They'll be gone.
Yeah.
It will come back to us in some form, not as local authorities, but as the Development Corporation. And actually, so therefore, what's our role now? Is to keep people being excited.
Yeah.
Not to be oppositional, because if we're oppositional, we might persuade other people to be oppositional.
Yeah.
Keep people excited and have a momentum of doing things outside the blue fence, which we did.
Yeah.
So that when the blue fence comes down, people just feel it's natural to move in.
Yeah.
And we called this whole programme Dents in the Fence, which was some physical things, but some just sports programmes and civic programmes and education and training. So what we did was, so I think that's quite an important part of what we did, is if your vision is, if the vision is kind of being thwarted in some sort of way, it's important not to sulk. And say, oh God, then that's it then. Yeah. It's important to say, no, actually, I'm taking a longer view.
Yeah.
What can we do now that will help us to get where we want to go in the future, even though it might be small steps and tiny things. So it's like, do what you can while you can do it.
So how do you keep that momentum going, that single vision, when the deadline has passed?
Oh, because the people own it. Mm-hmm. It's a place for people. And sorry, no pun intended there with Yeah.
Other housing associations are available.
So, for example, one argued very strongly that way back in the beginning when we were doing the land kind of acquisition programme, is that the London Borough of Hackney would consolidate all of the freehold land it owned within the Olympic Park into a new place within the park called North Park.
Okay.
So all of this landscaped green space just on the other side of this place where we're sitting at the moment is the freehold on the other side of the River Lee is owned by the London Borough of Hackney. It's owned by the people of Hackney in perpetuity. That is a green space, landscaped. It used to have fridge mountains on it and all sorts of things, and about 30, 40, 50 years, whatever, of contaminated waste dumped, and so on and so forth. It's now a re-landscaped green space, and that's a continuation of the famous Hackney Marshes. Further down the River Lee. The marshes progress, they expand, they grow.
I also think one of the big lessons is that if you're going to do big things, you need a single purpose focused delivery organisation. That worked for the Games with the Olympic Delivery Authority. I think it worked for the legacy with the London Legacy Development Corporation. And I think that's what you need if you're going to achieve a big regen project. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be a development corporation, but there are a lot of arguments for places where that should happen. So, I mean, if you look at some of the government's ambitions in the Oxford-Cambridge corridor, where I'm doing some work at the moment, you can see in Cambridge, they're now advanced on plans for a centrally led urban development corporation to really drive the huge intellectual science and knowledge-intensive industries and more housing that Cambridge needs. If you go up north to Manchester and look at the Mayoral Development Corporation in Stockport, where they just appointed a new chair and expanded the boundaries of the development corporation, Andy Burnham pushing that. You can see again how that is working and achieving success. So I think, one of the things that a DevCo tends to bring with it is leadership. You've got to have someone, and that's why I think, the new chair who's just been appointed in Stockport, really important. You have someone of credibility who's going to drive this. But it is the single focus and bringing people together around a vision, around an understanding of what you're trying to achieve that works really well. So I think that's important. You also need money. You always need money. And you have to be imaginative these days about where you get it from. You have to bring in money from the private sector as well as the public sector. And there's plenty of examples of places where that's happening as well. So I think it is possible to take over some of these features of success, the partnership between the private and the public sector, the single focus, adequate money, and you can achieve great things.
So that's it for this episode of Building the Olympic Park, but we're going to be back with another episode in just a few days. So click like and subscribe and you won't miss that, and we'll look forward to seeing you.